Blood was dripping onto the white tablecloth when Kael Varelli finally decided he'd had enough of watching monsters pretend to be men. The private dining room glowed gold and elegant, crystal catching candlelight like trapped stars. But Kael could smell violence the way sharks taste blood in water. Across from him sat Adrian Cross, investment executive, society darling, perfect husband. And beside Adrian sat his wife Celine, 28 years old and dying by degrees right there at the table. Kael watched Adrian's hand disappear beneath the tablecloth, watched Celine's fork tremble, watched her parents laugh at Adrian's jokes while their daughter slowly drowned in plain sight. When Adrian's ring tore Celine's dress open and the bruises spilled into the light like a confession, Kael's fist moved faster than thought. One strike, Adrian hit the floor, and the illusion shattered forever. If you want to see how a woman reclaims her life from a monster wearing a perfect smile, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The reservation had been made 3 weeks ago under Adrian Cross's name, which meant the best table, the best wine, the best of everything that money could purchase and control could reinforce. The restaurant itself occupied the top floor of a building Adrian's firm had refinanced 2 years prior, which meant everyone smiled wider when he entered and no one asked questions when things got tense. Kael Varelli arrived 20 minutes late on purpose. He didn't believe in arriving on time for men like Adrian Cross, men who measured their worth in punctuality and expected the world to organize itself around their calendars. Kael ran half the city's underground economy, shipping, currency exchange, certain high-value acquisitions that never appeared on any legal manifest, and he moved according to his own rhythm. Always had. Always would. When Kael stepped through the mahogany doors into the private dining room, every head turned except one. Celine Vale kept her eyes fixed on her water glass. Kael noticed that immediately. Adrian stood up fast, hand extended, smile bright and sharp as polished steel. "Mr. Varelli, finally! We were starting to worry." "No, you weren't," Kael said flatly, ignoring the handshake. He moved past Adrian like he was furniture and took the seat at the head of the table without asking permission. The dragon tattoo that coiled up his neck and disappeared beneath his collar caught the candlelight as he settled into the chair. Charcoal suit, black shirt, no tie. His dark eyes swept the room with the kind of attention that missed nothing and forgot less. Adrian's parents weren't present. Apparently this dinner was only important enough for Celine's family. Her mother Margaret sat rigid in pearls and anxiety, her father Richard in a gray suit that looked expensive but worn, like a man trying to maintain appearances on a shrinking budget. Both of them looked at Kael the way people look at unpredictable weather. And then there was Celine. She wore a dusty rose dress that probably cost more than most people earned in a month, but she wore it like camouflage. Her dark hair was pulled back severe and perfect. Her makeup was flawless. Her jewelry was understated. Everything about her presentation screamed, "I am not here." Kael had seen that look before, on people who'd learned that visibility was dangerous. Adrian reclaimed his seat beside Celine and immediately placed his hand on her thigh beneath the table. Possessive, controlling, a gesture designed to look affectionate from the outside. Kael watched Celine's breathing change, watched her spine straighten half an inch, watched her fingers tighten around the stem of her wine glass. "Thank you so much for agreeing to meet," Adrian began, launching into what was clearly a prepared speech. "I know your time is incredibly valuable, and the opportunity to discuss a potential partnership—" "Your wife hasn't said a word since I arrived," Kael interrupted. The table went quiet. Adrian's smile never wavered. Celine's always been the quiet type, thoughtful, observant. One of the things I love most about her. "Is that right?" Kael's voice carried no inflection. Statement, not question. Margaret laughed nervously. "Oh yes, ever since she was a little girl. Always had her nose in a book, didn't you, darling?" Celine nodded, just once. Mechanical. "She was studying literature at Columbia when we met," Adrian continued, his hand tightening on Celine's leg in a way that made her jaw clench. "Brilliant mind. But she decided to focus on supporting my career instead. Couldn't have built Cross Financial without her." Kael leaned back in his chair, studying Adrian the way a jeweler studies a diamond for flaws. "Interesting. Because Cross Financial's regulatory filings list 7 executives and 43 employees. Your wife's name doesn't appear anywhere." Adrian's smile finally flickered. Well, she's not on the payroll, obviously. I meant emotionally. Partnership. You know how it is. No, Kyle said. I don't. The waiter appeared with menus and wine, breaking the tension like a hammer through glass. Everyone made a show of studying the options, even though Adrian had pre-ordered everything 3 weeks ago. Control extended even to the menu. Kyle ordered whiskey, neat, expensive. Then he turned his attention fully to Celine. What do you think about your husband's shipping proposal? Celine's eyes went wide. Not with excitement, with fear. She started. She doesn't really involve herself in business matters, Adrian cut in smoothly. Not her area of interest. I asked her, Cale said. Not you. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the partnership details. Adrian mentioned you're looking to expand your freight operations into the northeastern corridor. I'm not looking to expand anything, Kyle said, still watching Celine. Your son-in-law requested this meeting. I'm here because I was curious what kind of man builds a financial empire in 4 years and leaves no footprints. Adrian's face went carefully blank. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, Kyle said, picking up his whiskey glass, that I ran a full background on Cross Financial before I walked through that door. Your firm has 3 shell companies in the Caymans, 2 in Delaware, and a holding structure so convoluted it would take federal investigators 6 months to unravel. You're not an investment executive. You're a money launderer who's very good at paperwork. Margaret gasped. Richard half stood from his chair. Adrian's smile turned brittle. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, Cale said. It's an observation. I don't care how you move money. I care why you wanted this meeting. I told you, partnership. You're in trouble, Cale said. Someone's circling. You need protection or legitimacy or both. And you thought if you could attach my name to your operation, it would make the wolves back off. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Adrian laughed. Too loud. Too long. You've got quite an imagination, Mr. Varelli. I've got quite an intelligence network, Kyle corrected. And it tells me you've been bleeding clients for 6 months. The SEC opened a preliminary inquiry 2 weeks ago. You're not here to expand. You're here because you're desperate. Margaret looked like she might faint. Richard stared at Adrian with dawning horror. But Kyle was still watching Celine, and Celine was watching the tablecloth like it held the secrets of the universe. Her hands were folded in her lap now, hidden from view. Her shoulders had curled inward just slightly. Her breathing had gone shallow and careful. Everything about her body language screamed, "Please don't notice me." Kyle noticed everything. Your wife's scared, he said quietly. She's fine, Adrian snapped, composure finally cracking. This is a business dinner, and you're being incredibly rude. She's terrified, Kyle continued. Has been since I sat down. Question is whether she's scared of me or scared of you. That's enough. Adrian stood up fast enough that his chair scraped backward. I think we're done here. Sit down, Kyle said. It wasn't a request. Adrian remained standing, fury and panic fighting for control of his face. You can't just sit down. Something in Kyle's voice made the decision for him. Adrian sat. Kyle set his whiskey glass on the table with a soft click that somehow sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Here's what's going to happen, he said. We're going to have dinner. All of us. And we're going to have a conversation about truth. Because I'm tired of watching people lie to themselves. Mr. Varelli, Richard began carefully. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your daughter has a bruise on her left wrist, Cale said. Shaped like fingers. 4 of them. Thumb on the inside. Recent. Maybe 2 days old. Margaret made a sound like a wounded animal. Celine didn't move. She's also favoring her left side when she breathes, Kyle continued, voice flat and clinical. Suggests broken or bruised ribs. The concealer on her neck is expensive, but not quite thick enough. I can see the edge of what looks like a handprint just above her collar. Stop, Adrian hissed. And she hasn't made eye contact with anyone at this table except the water glass, Kyle finished. Which tells me she's been trained not to draw attention, trained to be invisible, trained to survive. The word hung in the air like smoke. Margaret was crying now, silent tears tracking through her makeup. Richard had gone pale as paper. Adrian looked like a cornered animal trying to decide whether to run or attack. Selene finally looked up. Her eyes met Kael's for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Kael saw everything. The exhaustion, the fear, the trapped animal desperation of someone who'd stopped believing in rescue. Then she looked away. "I'm clumsy," she said softly. "I fell down the stairs last week. Hit the railing." "No, you didn't," Kael said. "I did." "You didn't." Adrian's hand shot across the table, reaching for Celine's arm. Kael moved faster, catching Adrian's wrist mid-grab and slamming it flat against the mahogany, hard enough to rattle the silverware. "Don't," Kael said quietly. They stayed frozen like that. Adrian's wrist pinned, Kael's grip absolute, everyone else too shocked to move. Then Kael released him and leaned back like nothing had happened. The appetizers arrived. Nobody touched them. Margaret was openly weeping now, and Richard kept opening his mouth like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Adrian was shaking with barely controlled rage, his careful mask dissolving by degrees. And Selene sat perfectly still, trapped in the eye of a hurricane she hadn't asked for and couldn't escape. Kael picked up his fork and began eating like this was the most normal dinner in the world. "Tell me about Cross Financial's investors," he said conversationally. Adrian didn't respond. "I'll take that as confirmation," Kael continued. "You don't have investors. You have marks. People you convinced to hand over their retirement funds for guaranteed returns that don't exist." "That's not—" Adrian started. "It is," Kael said. "And when the SEC finishes their investigation, you're looking at federal prison, wire fraud, securities fraud, probably tax evasion if they dig deep enough." Richard found his voice. "Adrian, is this true?" "Of course not," Adrian said, but his voice had gone thin and desperate. "He's trying to intimidate us, to get leverage." "I don't need leverage," Kael interrupted. "I have power. There's a difference." Margaret looked at her daughter. "Selene, sweetheart, has Adrian hurt you?" Celine's face was a mask. Perfect, practiced, empty. "No," she said. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," Kael said. "You're dying." Celine's hands started shaking. She hid them in her lap. "Not literally," Kael continued. "Not yet. But pieces of you have been dying for years. Every time you pretend to be clumsy, every time you apologize for existing, every time you make yourself smaller so he can feel bigger." "Stop," Selene whispered. "Why?" Kael asked. "Because it's uncomfortable? Because it's true?" "Because it's none of your business," Adrian snarled. Kael finally looked at him fully. "I'm making it my business." The main course arrived. $40 steaks and seared scallops and roasted vegetables that might as well have been plastic for all anyone cared. Adrian was spiraling now, desperation making him sloppy. "Look, Mr. Varelli, I understand you have concerns, but this is a private family matter." "There's nothing private about abuse," Kael said. "It just happens in private. Different thing." "I have never laid a hand on my wife." "You're laying a hand on her right now," Kael observed. "Under the table. I can see her dress shifting." Adrian jerked his hand away like he'd touched fire. Richard was staring at Adrian like he'd never seen him before. "What is happening right now?" "Truth," Kael said. "For probably the first time in years." Margaret reached across the table toward Selene. "Baby, please, talk to us." But Selene had gone somewhere else entirely. Her eyes were distant and glassy, her breathing shallow, her entire body locked in some kind of dissociative shutdown. Kael recognized it immediately. Trauma response. Fight, flight, or freeze. She'd frozen. He'd seen it before. In people who'd been hurt so consistently that their nervous system stopped trying to escape and just shut down instead. The table fell into horrible silence, punctuated only by Margaret's quiet crying and the ambient music playing from hidden speakers. Some classical piece that probably cost extra. Kael finished his steak methodically. Then he set down his fork and napkin and looked directly at Adrian. "I want to show you something," he said. He pulled out his phone and placed it face up on the table. A video began playing automatically. Security footage. Black and white. Timestamp from 4 nights ago. The video showed Adrian and Celine entering their apartment building. Adrian was pulling her by the arm, yanking her forward hard enough that she stumbled. In the elevator, he shoved her against the wall, yelled something the camera couldn't capture, grabbed her throat. The elevator doors opened. Adrian dragged Celine down the hallway and into their apartment. The door slammed shut. The video ended. Margaret was making sounds that weren't quite words. Richard had gone gray. Adrian looked like he might vomit. "I own that building," Kael said quietly. "Among others. The security team sends me flagged footage every morning. Usually it's package theft. Sometimes domestic situations." He picked up his phone and pocketed it. "I've been watching you hurt her for 2 months," he said, waiting to see if she'd leave, if her family would notice, if anyone would care enough to stop it. Adrian's mouth opened and closed silently. "Nobody did," Kael continued. "So here we are." Richard finally spoke, his voice breaking. "Celine, is this true?" Celine didn't answer, couldn't answer. She'd gone completely still, barely breathing. Adrian lurched to his feet. "This is entrapment or invasion of privacy or—" "It's evidence," Kael said, "and I have a lot more of it." "You can't do this," Adrian said. "You can't just—" "I already did." The waiter appeared with dessert menus. Read the room. Vanished immediately. Kael stood up slowly, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal suit jacket with deliberate calm. "Here's what happens next," he said. "You're going to sit here and finish this meal like a civilized person. Then you're going to go home to your empty apartment, alone, while Celine stays somewhere safe. Tomorrow morning, you're going to receive a call from an attorney informing you that she's filing for divorce. You're going to sign the papers without contest." "Like hell I am," Adrian spat. "You are," Kael said. "Because if you don't, that video goes to the police, along with the others. Along with medical records I'm sure Celine's doctors will be happy to provide once they're subpoenaed. Along with testimony from building staff, neighbors, anyone who's ever heard you through the walls." Adrian's face had gone from pale to flushed, rage flooding through the fear. "You think you can threaten me? You think I'm afraid of some thug who runs drugs and guns?" "I don't run drugs," Kael corrected mildly. "And I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining reality." He turned to Celine's parents. "Your daughter needs you," he said. "I don't know how you missed this. I don't know how you convinced yourselves everything was fine. But you have one chance to show up for her, starting now." Margaret was openly sobbing. Richard looked destroyed. Then Kael looked at Celine. She was staring at the table, tears streaming silently down her carefully made-up face, her entire body trembling with the effort of holding herself together. "You don't have to say anything," Kael told her quietly. "You don't have to explain or defend or perform. You just have to breathe. That's all you owe anyone right now." For a moment, nothing moved. Then Adrian did something catastrophically stupid. He tried to fix Celine's hair, a performative gesture of affection, meant to prove tenderness, meant to show everyone that Kael was wrong and their marriage was loving and intact. His wedding ring, heavy gold with an ornate edge, snagged the collar of Celine's dress. The fabric ripped, and everything underneath became visible. Dark purple bruises bloomed across Celine's collarbone like grotesque flowers. Perfect fingerprints pressed into pale skin, marks that could only come from hands squeezing with intent to hurt, fresh enough that the edges were still deep purple, old enough that the centers had started yellowing. The bruises wrapped around the side of her neck and disappeared beneath her dress. Margaret screamed. Richard made a sound like he'd been gutted. Adrian froze, his hand still suspended in the air, his wedding ring still caught in the torn fabric. The restaurant went silent. Other diners at distant tables had stopped eating, sensing catastrophe. Kael moved. His hand shot across the table like a striking snake and caught Adrian's wrist before he could pull away. Kael lifted Adrian's hand into the light, examining the wedding ring with clinical precision. "Interesting design," Kael said softly. "Heavy, jagged edge. See how it's slightly bent here?" He turned Adrian's hand so the light caught the ring from different angles. "Matches the cuts on her throat perfectly," Kael finished. Then he released Adrian's wrist with a sharp shove that sent him stumbling backward. Adrian tried to speak. Failed. Tried again. "This is my wife," he finally managed. "You can't—" "No," Kael interrupted. This is a crime scene. The words fell like a verdict. Adrian's carefully constructed world began collapsing in real time. His face went through a dozen expressions in 3 seconds. Shock, panic, fury, denial, calculation, desperation. Then he made his final mistake. He lunged at Celine. "You're going to tell them," he hissed, grabbing her arm and yanking her toward him. "You're going to tell them this is a misunderstanding. You're going to fix this right now, or I swear to—" Cale's fist hit Adrian's jaw before the threat finished forming. One strike. Clean, brutal, efficient. Adrian's head snapped sideways and he crashed backward into the silver service cart. Porcelain exploded. Wine glasses shattered. A $40 bottle of red wine erupted across white marble floors like arterial spray. Adrian landed hard on his back among the wreckage, blood pouring from his mouth, his perfect white teeth now outlined in crimson. The restaurant erupted in chaos. Waiters rushing forward, other diners standing up, someone shouting about calling security. Cale ignored all of it. He descended on Adrian slowly, deliberately, adjusting his cuffs like he was preparing for a board meeting instead of ending a life. "You built your power on her silence," Cale said quietly, standing over Adrian's broken body. "Now watch your entire world disappear." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Warehouse," he said into the receiver. "Bring the car around back. We have cargo." Then he looked at the restaurant manager who'd appeared wringing his hands nervously. "Bill goes to Cross Financial," Cale said, "including damages. They'll be liquidating assets shortly." Adrian tried to sit up, blood dripping from his split lip. "You can't do this. I'll call the police. I'll press charges." "For what?" Cale asked. "Self-defense? I was protecting a woman from her abuser. Every person in this room just watched you grab her violently. Every person in this room just saw the bruises you put on her body." He looked around at the frozen diners. "Anyone disagree?" he asked the room. Silence. Adrian's face went through one final transformation, from fury to understanding to absolute terror. "No," he whispered. "No, wait." The doors opened. 3 men in black suits entered the dining room like shadows made flesh. They didn't rush, didn't speak, just moved with the kind of synchronized efficiency that suggested they'd done this before. They hauled Adrian to his feet. He struggled, screaming now, all pretense of dignity abandoned. "You can't do this! Someone help me! Call the police! I'm being kidnapped!" Nobody moved. Nobody. The men dragged Adrian toward the door. His shoes left skid marks on the polished marble. His expensive suit was ruined with wine and blood and broken dreams. "Celine!" he screamed as they pulled him through the doorway. "Celine, please, tell them I didn't—" The doors closed. His voice cut off mid-sentence like someone had flipped a switch. The restaurant remained frozen in horrible tableau. Margaret collapsed into Richard's arms, both of them shaking. The other diners slowly returned to their meals, eyes down, pretending they hadn't seen anything. And Celine sat motionless at the ruined table, tears streaming down her face, the torn dress exposing bruises that finally had witnesses. Cale returned to his seat, picked up his napkin, wiped a spot of blood from his knuckles with methodical care. Then he looked at Celine's parents. "You have a choice," he said. "You can pretend this didn't happen. Go home, tell yourselves it was a misunderstanding. Let Adrian's lawyers spin this into something manageable." He paused. "Or you can protect your daughter, finally, for the first time in 3 years." Margaret was hyperventilating. Richard looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. What did you do to him?" Richard whispered. "Nothing yet," Cale said. "But by sunrise, Cross Financial will cease to exist. Every account frozen. Every asset seized. Every investor will receive documentation of the fraud. The SEC will have everything they need delivered anonymously to their office." He stood up. "Your daughter needs a place to stay tonight," he said. "Somewhere Adrian doesn't know about, somewhere safe. Can you provide that?" Margaret nodded frantically. "Yes. Yes, of course. Celine, sweetheart, you're coming home with us. No," Celine said. Everyone stopped. It was the first word she'd spoken with any force in hours. "No?" Margaret repeated. Celine looked at her mother with eyes that had gone hard and distant. "You knew," she said quietly. "You saw the bruises, the canceled plans, the way I stopped talking, And you did nothing. We didn't, Margaret started. You did, Celine interrupted. You wanted to believe everything was fine because it was easier than asking hard questions. She stood up on shaking legs, clutching the torn dress closed with one hand. I'm not going anywhere with you tonight, she said. I need to be alone. Kael spoke carefully. You shouldn't be alone. Then what should I be? Celine asked, voice cracking. Because I don't know anymore. I don't know who I am without being afraid. I don't know how to exist in a room without calculating escape routes. Her voice broke completely. Kael stepped forward slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. You should be safe, he said quietly. That's all. Just safe. Everything else can wait. Celine looked at him like she didn't understand the word. I have a place, Kael continued. Top floor. Secure. No one gets in without clearance. You can have your own space, your own time. No expectations. Why would you do that? Celine whispered. Because monsters survive when powerful people stay comfortable, Kael said. And I was tired of being comfortable. For a long moment, Celine just stared at him. Then she nodded. Once. Kael gestured toward the door. Cars downstairs. Margaret started to protest, but Richard put a hand on her arm. For once, he read the situation correctly. Their daughter needed space more than she needed their guilt and promises. Celine walked toward the exit on unsteady legs, still clutching her dress closed. Kael fell into step beside her but didn't touch her, didn't crowd her, just existed as a silent presence between her and the rest of the world. They left the restaurant behind, left the shattered glass and spilled wine and ruined illusions. Left Margaret weeping and Richard drowning in failure. Left a room full of witnesses who would spend years arguing about what they'd actually seen. The elevator descended in silence. Kael's car was waiting in the underground parking garage. Black sedan, tinted windows, driver who'd learned long ago not to ask questions. Celine slid into the back seat. Kael took the seat across from her, maintaining distance. The car pulled into traffic. Rain had started falling, glazing the city streets in neon reflections. Saturday night crowds flowed past like schools of fish, oblivious to the woman whose entire world had just shattered and reformed in the space of 2 hours. Celine stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. He'll come after me, she said quietly. When he gets free, he won't get free, Kael said. You can't just keep him. I'm not keeping him, Kael interrupted. I'm making sure he understands his options. By morning, he'll sign the divorce papers. He'll liquidate what's left of his assets. He'll leave the city. And if he doesn't? Kael looked at her fully. Then he'll learn what happens to men who hurt women and think they're untouchable. Celine's hands were shaking in her lap. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Be free, she whispered. I've spent 3 years learning how to survive him, how to read his moods, how to make myself invisible, how to apologize for existing. I don't know how to just be. You start by breathing, Kael said. That's all. Just breathe. The rest will come. The car climbed through the city's vertical layers past street-level chaos into the architectural stratosphere where buildings became glass towers piercing low clouds. Kael's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building that probably had a name Celine couldn't pronounce. The elevator required a key card. The hallway had cameras at every junction. The door had 3 separate locks. Safe. The word felt foreign. Inside the penthouse was exactly what Celine expected. Cold minimalism, polished concrete, charcoal steel, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sleeping city. Expensive furniture that looked uncomfortable. Art that probably cost more than cars. Empty. But not in a bad way. Empty, like a blank page. Like possibility. Kael gestured toward a hallway. Guest suites through there, bathroom. Closet has clothes in various sizes. Previous tenant left some things. Lock on the inside of the door. Celine walked toward it like she was moving through water. At the doorway, she stopped. Thank you, she said without turning around. Don't thank me yet, Kael replied. Healing's harder than surviving. You'll hate me some days for forcing you into it. Maybe, Celine said, but at least I'll be alive to hate you. She disappeared into the guest suite. The lock clicked. Kael stood alone in his empty penthouse, knuckles still stained with Adrian Cross's blood, and wondered if he'd just saved a woman's life or destroyed whatever fragile equilibrium she'd built to survive. Outside, the city glittered like broken glass. Somewhere across town, Adrian Cross was learning that money couldn't buy his way out of every problem. Somewhere deeper in the city's infrastructure, systems were already moving, accounts freezing, files corrupting, investors receiving anonymous packages of evidence. By sunrise, Cross Financial would be a memory. By next week, Adrian Cross would be a cautionary tale. And Celine Vale would have to figure out who she was when she wasn't busy disappearing. Kael poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and stood at the window watching rain fall on the city he controlled through careful violence and strategic mercy. He'd made a promise tonight. Now he had to keep it, even if keeping it meant dismantling everything Adrian Cross had built, even if it meant becoming the villain in someone else's story, even if it meant crossing lines he usually left uncrossed, because some things mattered more than maintaining comfortable distance from other people's suffering. Some things required action instead of observation. And Kael Varelli was done watching monsters pretend to be men while powerful people stayed comfortable. The rain fell harder. The city slept. And behind a locked door in the guest suite, Celine Vale finally allowed herself to cry. Not quiet tears, not controlled tears. The kind of crying that comes from 3 years of accumulated silence finally finding voice. The kind of crying that sounds like breaking, but also like beginning. Celine woke to unfamiliar silence. No alarm clock. No Adrian's breathing beside her. No automatic calculation of how loud the shower needed to be to avoid waking him. How quiet her footsteps needed to stay. How carefully she needed to close the bathroom door. Just silence. She lay motionless in the guest bed, staring at a ceiling she didn't recognize, her body screaming that something was wrong because nothing hurt. No bruised ribs protesting her breathing. No handprint aching on her thigh. No spike of pain when she turned her head. The panic hit 3 seconds later. Where was she? How did she get here? What had she done? Then memory crashed through the confusion like a wrecking ball. The restaurant, the torn dress, the bruises exposed to the world. Kael's fist connecting with Adrian's jaw. Blood on marble floors. Celine sat up fast enough that vertigo washed through her skull. Morning light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the guest suite gold and unfamiliar. The bed was massive, the sheets were expensive, and the door was still locked from the inside. Safe. The word felt like a lie. Her phone sat on the nightstand where she'd left it before collapsing into exhausted sleep. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, all from Adrian. She picked up the phone with shaking hands. The messages started desperate. Where are you? We need to talk. That man is dangerous. Come home. They escalated to angry. You made me look like a fool. You embarrassed me in front of your parents. This is unacceptable. Then turned threatening. If you think you can just leave me, you're insane. I own you, your apartment, your car, your credit cards. Everything is in my name. You have nothing without me. The final message had arrived 20 minutes ago. Answer your fucking phone. Celine's hand started shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. A soft knock at the bedroom door made her jump. It's Kael, came his voice from the other side. I'm leaving breakfast outside the door. No pressure to eat it, no pressure to talk. Just want you to know it's there. Footsteps retreated. Celine sat frozen, listening to silence return. She counted to 60, then counted again, then finally unlocked the door and opened it a crack. A tray sat on the polished concrete floor. Coffee, toast, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit, orange juice. No note, no demands, no expectations. Just breakfast. Celine brought the tray inside, locked the door again, and ate standing up because sitting at a table felt too vulnerable. The food tasted like nothing. She forced it down anyway because her body needed fuel and she was done letting fear make decisions. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian, I know you're with him. I know what kind of man Kael Varelli is. Criminals, thugs. You think he's protecting you? He's using you to get at me. Another buzz. Adrian, come home. We'll fix this. I'll get therapy. We can start over. Please, baby. I love you. Celine stared at the messages until the words stopped meaning anything. Then she blocked the number. The silence that followed felt enormous. She showered in the guest bathroom, standing under water so hot it turned her skin pink, scrubbing away the restaurant and the fear and 3 years of learned helplessness. The The bruises were still there when she looked down, purple and yellow and green, a roadmap of violence written on skin. But they were fading. Eventually, everything fades. She found clothes in the guest closet like Kyle had promised, designer labels in multiple sizes, tags still attached like someone had bought them specifically for emergencies. She chose black jeans and a gray sweater that covered everything, armor disguised as casual wear. When she finally emerged from the guest suite, she found Kyle sitting at the kitchen island with a laptop and coffee, dressed in a black t-shirt and dark jeans. The dragon tattoo coiled up his neck like it was alive. He looked up when she entered, but didn't smile or stand or make any sudden movements. "Coffee's fresh," he said. "Mugs are in the cabinet above the machine." Celine poured herself a cup with hands that only shook a little. They stood in silence for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. "Adrian's been calling," Celine finally said. "Expected," Kyle replied, eyes back on his laptop. "And texting." "Also expected." "I blocked him." Kyle looked up at that. "Good." Celine wrapped both hands around the coffee mug like it was the only solid thing in the universe. "What happened to him? After you took him?" "He spent the night in a warehouse on the South Docks," Kyle said. "Uncomfortable, but unharmed. This morning, my attorney delivered divorce papers and a property settlement agreement. Adrian signs both, he walks free, he refuses, the video footage goes to every news outlet in the city." "And he agreed?" "He's signing them right now," Kyle said, checking his phone. "Just got confirmation." Celine felt something crack open in her chest. Relief, maybe. Or terror. Hard to tell the difference anymore. "That fast?" she whispered. "I'm efficient," Kyle said. "You're terrifying." "Also true." Celine set down the coffee mug before she dropped it. "Why are you doing this?" Kyle closed his laptop and gave her his full attention. "I told you last night, I was tired of watching monsters pretend to be men." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have." They stared at each other across the kitchen island. Celine saw something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Not pity, not desire. Something harder and colder and more honest. Recognition. Like he'd seen this story before and hated how it ended. Her phone buzzed. She flinched instinctively. Kale's expression darkened. "I thought you blocked him." "I did." Celine checked the screen. "It's my mother," she answered before she could think better of it. "Celine? Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you? Your father and I have been worried sick." "I'm fine," Celine interrupted. "We need to talk about last night, about what happened, about what you're going to do. I'm getting a divorce." Silence on the other end. Then Margaret's voice came back smaller, careful. "Sweetheart, I understand you're upset, but maybe you should think about this. Adrian made mistakes, yes, but marriage is work. It requires forgiveness, commitment. You can't just throw away 3 years because—" Celine hung up. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it felt different. Not fear, rage. "You okay?" Kale asked. "No," Celine said, "but I'm tired of pretending I am." Her phone started buzzing again. Margaret calling back. Celine declined the call and turned off the phone completely. The silence felt like victory. Kyle stood up from the kitchen island. "I have a meeting in an hour. You're welcome to stay here. Door locks from the inside. Security knows not to let anyone up without your explicit permission." "What kind of meeting?" Celine heard herself ask. Kale paused. "The kind you don't want details about." "Criminal kind. Gray area kind," Kale corrected. "Most things are gray when you look close enough." He grabbed a charcoal jacket from the back of a chair and shrugged it on. The dragon tattoo disappeared beneath expensive fabric. "There's food in the fridge," he said. "Books in the study. TV works. Make yourself at home." Then he left. Celine stood alone in the massive penthouse, surrounded by cold minimalism and expensive emptiness, and realized she had absolutely no idea what to do with freedom. For 3 years, every minute had been calculated around Adrian's schedule, Adrian's moods, Adrian's needs. Wake up early enough to make coffee before he got irritated. Dress conservatively enough that he didn't accuse her of trying to attract other men. Speak quietly enough that he didn't call her shrill. Exist carefully enough that he didn't find reasons to hurt her. Now she had nothing but unstructured time and a locked door and silence. It felt like drowning. She tried watching TV, couldn't focus. Tried reading, Words slid off her brain like water off glass. Tried sitting still. Lasted 40 seconds before panic started clawing up her throat. Finally, she did the only thing that made sense. She called her father. Richard answered on the first ring. Celine, Jesus, your mother said you hung up on her. I need to ask you something, Celine interrupted. And I need you to tell me the truth. Of course. Anything. When did you know? Silence. Dad, when did you know Adrian was hurting me? More silence. Then Richard's voice came back wrecked and old. I didn't. Not for certain. I suspected, but I told myself I was being paranoid. When? Celine pressed. Last Christmas, Richard admitted. You wore that turtleneck in 70-degree weather. Your mother said it was a fashion choice, but I saw bruises on your wrist when you reached for the wine. I told myself it was nothing, that I was seeing things, that Adrian was a good man and I was being a coward, Celine finished. Richard made a sound like he'd been punched. Yes? You chose comfort over truth, Celine continued, voice flat and cold. You chose not knowing over having to do something uncomfortable. You chose Adrian's reputation over my safety. Celine, I need you to understand that, Celine said. I need you to sit with that. Because I spent 3 years thinking no one cared enough to see me. Now I know the truth. You saw. You just didn't care enough to act. That's not fair, Saho. It's completely fair, Celine snapped. You're my father. You were supposed to protect me. You didn't. So now I need to protect myself. What does that mean? It means I'm done, Celine said. With Adrian. With pretending. With making myself smaller so everyone else stays comfortable. She hung up before Richard could respond. The rage was building now, hot and unfamiliar and terrifying. 3 years of swallowed anger finally finding voice. Her phone rang again immediately. She declined it. It rang again. Declined. On the third call, she answered. Stop calling me, she said. Celine. Margaret's voice was sharp with panic. You need to come home right now. Adrian's attorney is here and he's saying terrible things about Mr. Varelli, about his criminal connections, about how he's manipulating you. Good, Celine said. What? I said good. I hope Adrian's terrified. I hope he never sleeps comfortably again. I hope every time he closes his eyes, he sees my bruises. Celine Marie Vale, that is not how we raised you. No, Celine interrupted. You raised me to be polite, to be accommodating, to make myself invisible so I didn't inconvenience anyone. You raised me to be the perfect victim. Margaret gasped like she'd been slapped. I'm done being what you raised me to be, Celine continued. I'm done being what Adrian needed me to be. I'm figuring out who I actually am, and if that makes you uncomfortable, you can join Dad in sitting with that discomfort. She hung up, turned off the phone again, threw it across the room hard enough that it hit the wall and cracked. Then she stood in the middle of Kael's empty penthouse and screamed. No words, just sound. 3 years of silence erupting into one long, primal howl. She screamed until her throat was raw, until her lungs burned, until the rage started transforming into something else. Grief, maybe? Or liberation? Hard to tell the difference. When Kael returned 4 hours later, he found Celine sitting on the floor of his study, surrounded by law books she'd pulled from the shelves. Learning anything? He asked from the doorway. New York is a no-fault divorce state, Celine said without looking up. Which means I don't have to prove abuse to get a divorce. I just have to prove the marriage is irretrievably broken. Correct. But I want to prove abuse anyway, Celine continued. I want it documented. I want it public. I want everyone who thought Adrian was perfect to know exactly what he is. Kael leaned against the doorframe. That's a harder road. I don't care. It means depositions, court testimony, cross-examination by his attorneys who will try to make you look unstable. I don't care, Celine repeated. It means your parents will have to testify about what they saw last night, about what they ignored for 3 years. Good, Celine said. They should have to sit with that. Kael studied her for a long moment. What changed? I got angry, Celine said simply. For the first time in 3 years, I let myself get angry instead of afraid. Anger's useful, Kael said, if you point it in the right direction. I'm pointing it at everyone who made me feel like I deserved this, Celine said. Adrian, my parents, myself. She finally looked up at him. Can you help me destroy him? She asked. Completely. Not just the divorce. I want his reputation gone. His business gone. Everything. Cale's expression didn't change. Yes. Why? Because you asked, Cale said, and because he deserves it. Just like that? Just like that. Celine stood up slowly, her body still protesting movement, still carrying the physical evidence of 3 years under Adrian's control. I don't trust you, she said. Smart, Cale replied. I don't know your motives. Smarter. But I need your help anyway. That's called pragmatism, Cale said. It'll serve you better than trust. Someone knocked on the penthouse door. Hard. Urgent. Cale's entire demeanor shifted in half a second, relaxed to predatory, casual to dangerous. Stay here, he said quietly. He moved toward the door with the kind of fluid economy that suggested violence was always an option, never a surprise. Through the study doorway, Celine watched him check the security monitor. Then his expression went cold and flat. He opened the door. Adrian stood in the hallway, disheveled and desperate, dried blood still crusting the corner of his mouth from last night. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His hair was a mess. His eyes were wild. I need to see my wife, he said. No, Cale replied. She's my wife. You can't keep her from me. She's not your wife anymore, Cale interrupted. You signed the papers 3 hours ago. Under duress, Adrian spat. You threatened me, kidnapped me, coerced me. Oh, I offered you a choice, Cale corrected. You chose self-preservation over fighting. Now live with it. Adrian tried to push past him. Cale didn't move, but something in his stillness made Adrian freeze. I will hurt you, Cale said quietly. Badly, permanently, if you take one more step. Celine! Adrian screamed past Cale into the penthouse. Celine, please, I love you. I'm sorry. We can fix this. Celine stepped into view. Adrian's face transformed, desperation melting into manufactured tenderness. Baby, he said. Thank God. Listen, I know last night was intense, but we can work through this. I'll do whatever you want. Therapy, anger management, couples counseling. Get out, Celine said. Adrian blinked. What? I said get out. Her voice was steady now, clear. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your promises. I want you gone. You don't mean that? I do. Celine, you're confused. This man has manipulated you. The only person who manipulated me was you, Celine interrupted. For 3 years, every day, every hour, you made me believe I was worthless without you, that I deserved the pain, that no one would believe me if I tried to leave. I never... You did, Celine said, and I'm done pretending you didn't. Adrian's manufactured tenderness cracked. You're making a huge mistake. You think he cares about you? He's a criminal, a thug. He'll get bored and throw you away. Maybe, Celine said, but at least he won't put bruises on my neck. Adrian's face went red. I gave you everything, a home, money, status, respect. You gave me nothing but fear, Celine said, and I'm giving it back. She turned and walked away, disappearing back into the study, leaving Adrian screaming in the hallway. Cale watched her go. Then he looked back at Adrian with empty black eyes. She's done with you, Cale said. Now I suggest you leave before I make you leave. This isn't over, Adrian hissed. It is, Cale said. You just haven't accepted it yet. I'll ruin you. I'll go to the police. I'll tell them everything. Tell them what? Cale asked. That I stopped you from abusing your wife? That I provided video evidence of your violence? That I helped her escape a dangerous situation? He stepped closer to Adrian, close enough that Adrian had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. Go to the police, Cale said softly. Please. I'd love to watch them arrest you for domestic violence while you try to explain the bruises on Celine's body. Adrian's mouth opened and closed silently. You're done, Cale continued. Cross Financial is liquidated. Your investors know you're a fraud. Your reputation is destroyed. Your wife is gone. You have nothing left. I have lawyers, who I've already paid more than you can afford, Cale interrupted. They're dropping you as a client tomorrow. Adrian staggered backward like he'd been shoved. You can't do this. I already did. I'll kill you, Adrian whispered. I swear to God, I'll... Kael's hand shot out and grabbed Adrian's throat, slamming him against the hallway wall hard enough to crack plaster. Adrian made a choking sound, his eyes going wide with terror. Threaten me again, Kael said quietly, his face inches from Adrian's. See what happens. He held Adrian there for 5 seconds, 10, 15, then released him. Adrian collapsed to his knees, gasping and clutching his throat. Leave, Kael said, and don't come back. If I see you near this building, near Celine, near anyone she cares about, I will end you. Not legally, not politically, literally. He stepped backward into the penthouse. Goodbye, Adrian. The door closed. The locks clicked. Outside in the hallway, Adrian stayed on his knees, breathing hard, the full weight of his destroyed life finally settling on his shoulders. Inside the penthouse, Kael found Celine standing in the study, her whole body shaking. You okay? He asked. I don't know, Celine admitted. I feel like I should be crying or celebrating or something, but I just feel empty. That's normal, Kael said. You've been running on adrenaline for 3 years. Now that the immediate threat is gone, you're crashing. How do you know? Experience, Kael said simply. Celine looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since last night. Saw the scars hidden beneath expensive clothes, saw the careful distance he maintained from everyone, saw the calculated violence wrapped in calm. What happened to you? She asked quietly. Long story, Kael said. Not relevant. It feels relevant. It's not. They stood in silence. Then Celine's legs gave out. Kael caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her gently to sitting, maintaining contact only as long as necessary before stepping back. Sorry, Celine gasped. I don't know why. Adrenaline crash, Kael repeated. Your body kept you alive through crisis. Now it's shutting down. I hate this. I know. I hate feeling weak. You're not weak, Kael said. You survived 3 years of systematic abuse. That requires strength most people don't have. Then why do I feel like I'm falling apart? Because surviving and healing are different things, Kael said. Surviving means staying alive. Healing means learning to live again. The second one's harder. Celine leaned back against the wall, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and relief and terror. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Be a person again. Kael sat down across from her, maintaining careful distance, his back against the opposite wall. Start small, he said. Breathe, eat, sleep, repeat. Everything else can wait. That's it? That's it. Sounds too simple. Simple doesn't mean easy, Kael said. They sat in silence for a while. The city hummed beyond the windows. Somewhere below, Adrian was probably still in the hallway, trying to process the death of everything he'd built on Celine's silence. What happens now? Celine finally asked. Now you decide who you want to be, Kael said. Without Adrian, without fear, without anyone else's expectations. I don't know who that is. Then you figure it out, Kael said. One decision at a time. Celine looked at him across the study floor. Why are you helping me? I told you. No, Celine interrupted. The real reason, not the speech about monsters and comfort, the actual reason. Kael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because no one helped me. 3 words. Flat. Final. Celine understood instantly. Whatever had happened to Kael Virelli, whatever had turned him into this careful, controlled, dangerous man, he'd faced it alone. And he'd decided no one else should have to. Thank you, Celine said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Kael replied. Adrian's not going to accept this quietly. Men like him never do. They escalate, they retaliate, The building's fire alarm exploded into sound. Kael was on his feet instantly, pulling out his phone, checking security feeds. Fuck, he said. What? Adrian set a fire in the parking garage, Kael said, already moving toward the door. He's forcing an evacuation. Why would he? Then Celine understood. If everyone had to evacuate, she'd have to leave the penthouse, have to be visible, have to be vulnerable. Adrian was hunting her. Kael was already on his phone. Lock the parking garage elevators, full building lockdown. No one in or out until... He stopped. His expression went cold. What? Celine asked, panic rising. Cale showed her his phone, security footage from the building lobby. Adrian standing with 3 other men, all of them armed, moving toward the elevators. He brought backup, Kyle said quietly. The fire alarm screamed. Somewhere below, Adrian was coming. And Celine realized with absolute clarity that Adrian wasn't trying to win her back. He was trying to punish her for leaving. Cale locked the penthouse door and moved toward a section of wall that looked like every other section. He pressed something. A panel slid open, revealing a safe. From inside, he pulled a gun. "What are you doing?" Celine whispered. "Ending this," Kyle said. "You can't just—" "I can," Kyle interrupted. "And I will." He checked the gun with practiced efficiency. Locked and loaded. Then he looked at Celine. "There's a panic room through that door," he said, pointing to what looked like a closet. "Reinforced steel. Independent air supply. Lock from the inside. No one gets in without explosives. I'm not hiding while you—" "Yes," Kyle interrupted. "You are. Because Adrian brought guns and violence and desperation. Because I can handle that and you can't. Because you surviving this matters more than your pride." The elevator dinged. Someone had bypassed the lockdown. Cale moved toward the penthouse door, gun held low and ready. "Go," he said to Celine. "Now." Celine ran toward the panic room, her hands shaking so hard she could barely work the lock. Behind her, she heard the penthouse door explode inward, heard gunshots, heard Cale's voice, cold and calm. "Wrong apartment." More gunshots. Someone screaming. Celine slammed the panic room door shut and locked it from the inside, just as Adrian's voice echoed through the penthouse. "Where is she?" More gunshots. The sound of bodies hitting the floor. Then silence. Horrible, complete silence. Celine pressed her back against the reinforced steel wall, her whole body shaking, and realized that her freedom had just cost someone their life. Maybe multiple lives. Maybe Kyle's. And there was nothing she could do but wait in the dark and pray that when the door finally opened, it wasn't Adrian on the other side. The silence stretched and stretched, and Celine understood with perfect clarity that her old life had just ended violently in Kyle Varelli's penthouse. Now she had to figure out how to live with whatever came next, if she survived long enough to find out. The silence lasted 14 seconds. Celine counted every one of them in the darkness of the panic room, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her body pressed against reinforced steel like it could protect her from what was happening on the other side. Then she heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the penthouse like someone conducting an inspection. "Celine," Kyle's voice, flat, controlled. "It's over. You can come out." Celine's hand shook as she reached for the lock, then stopped. Something felt wrong. Kyle's voice was too controlled, too careful, like he was reading from a script instead of speaking naturally. "Celine," he said again, "Adrian's gone. You're safe." She pressed her ear against the steel door, listening. No other sounds, no movement, no evidence of what the gunshots and screaming had left behind. "I need to see you," Kyle continued. "Need to make sure you're not hurt." Celine's finger hovered over the lock release. Then she heard it, a slight shift in tone, a microscopic hesitation between words. Kyle was lying. She pulled her hand back and stayed silent. "Celine." The voice was harder now, impatient. "Open the door." She pressed herself further against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. More footsteps. Closer now. "I know you can hear me," the voice said. "I know you're scared, but you need to trust me." Except Celine had learned 3 years ago what happened when she trusted the wrong person. She stayed silent. A long pause. Then Adrian's voice came through the door. All pretense dropped. "Fine. We'll do this the hard way." Something slammed against the panic room door, metal on metal. Adrian trying to force it open. Celine bit down on her hand to keep from screaming. Another slam, then another. "You think a locked door changes anything?" Adrian shouted. "You think you can hide from me forever?" Slam. "I own you." Slam. "You're my wife." Slam. "You don't get to just leave." The impact stopped. Celine heard Adrian's ragged breathing on the other side of the steel. "Okay," he said, voice dropping to something worse than shouting. Something quiet and reasonable and absolutely insane. "Okay, you want to play it this way? Fine. I've got time. I've got all the time in the world." Footsteps retreating. Then silence. Celine waited in the dark, counting her heartbeats, trying to understand what had just happened. Where was Kyle? Was he dead? Injured? Had Adrian's men overpowered him? The panic room had no windows, no cameras, no way to see what was happening outside. Just 4 walls of reinforced steel and an air supply that would last 72 hours. She could survive in here for 3 days. The question was what would be waiting when she finally had to come out. Time became meaningless in the darkness. Could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours when she finally heard voices again. Multiple voices this time. "Oh, don't understand. He was right here. Check the other rooms. Where's the girl?" Celine's breath caught. Those weren't Adrian's men. One voice she recognized immediately. Kyle. Alive. Relief flooded through her so fast it made her dizzy. "Celine," Kyle's voice, urgent now. "If you can hear me, stay in the panic room. Don't open it for anyone. Do you understand? Anyone." She wanted to respond, but training from 3 years of survival kept her silent. Never reveal your position. Never make yourself visible. Never trust that safety is real. "How many were there?" Another voice. Older. Authoritative. "4," Kale replied. "Adrian and 3 hired guns. They came in through the service elevator, bypassed security." "Where are they now?" "Gone," Kale said. "By the time I cleared the first 3, Adrian ran. Probably down the south stairwell." "And your guest?" A pause. "Safe," Kale said. "Locked in the panic room like I told her." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Footsteps moving through the penthouse. Multiple sets, professional, organized. "Jesus Christ," the older voice said. "You killed them?" "They came into my home with guns," Kyle replied. "What did you expect?" "I expected you to call the police like a normal person." "I'm not a normal person," Kyle interrupted. "And neither are you, Marcus, so let's skip the performance." Marcus. Celine recognized the name from overhead conversations at the restaurant. Kale's attorney, the one who delivered the divorce papers to Adrian. "This is a mess," Marcus said. 3 bodies, all of them with records, all of them connected to Adrian Cross. "When the police start investigating, they won't find anything," Kyle said. "By tomorrow morning, these men never existed. Their records will disappear. The security footage will show a malfunction, and Adrian Cross will be too busy fleeing federal charges to cause problems. You can't just erase 3 murders." "Watch me," Kyle said flatly. Silence. Then Marcus's voice, quieter now. "What about the girl?" "What about her?" "She's a witness." "She's a victim," Kyle corrected, "and she's under my protection." "Kale, listen to me very carefully," Marcus said. "That woman is a liability. She's seen too much. She knows too much. If she talks, she won't." "You don't know that. I know that she spent 3 years keeping her husband's secrets because speaking up meant dying," Kyle interrupted. "I know that survival requires silence. I know she understands that better than anyone." More silence. Inside the panic room, Celine felt something cold settle in her stomach. Liability. That's what she was now. Not a person who needed saving, not someone worthy of protection. A problem that needed managing. "What's the plan?" Marcus asked. "We clean this up," Kyle said. "Standard protocol. You call your contacts at the medical examiner's office. I'll handle the bodies. By sunrise, this never happened." "And Adrian?" "Already put out word through my network," Kyle said. "Every port, every airport, every border crossing for 500 miles. If Adrian shows his face anywhere, I'll know about it." "He's desperate," Marcus warned. "Desperate men do stupid things." "Good," Kyle said. "Stupid things are easier to predict." Footsteps. More people entering the penthouse. "Clean team's here," someone announced. "Get started," Kale ordered. "I want this place spotless in 2 hours." The voices faded as people dispersed through the penthouse. Celine stayed frozen against the steel wall, her mind racing. Kyle had killed 3 men in his living room and was now orchestrating a cover-up like it was routine. Bodies would disappear. Evidence would vanish. The police would never know anything had happened, because Kael Varelli had that kind of power. The kind of power that could erase inconvenient truths. The kind of power that could erase inconvenient people. Like her. She thought about Marcus's words. That woman is a liability. Thought about how easily Kael had agreed to protect her. How quickly he'd dismantled Adrian's entire life. What happened when she became more trouble than she was worth? What happened when protecting her cost more than eliminating her? The panic room suddenly felt less like safety and more like a cage. Hours passed. Celine heard movement throughout the penthouse. Professional voices discussing logistics. The sound of something heavy being dragged across marble floors. Chemical smells seeping under the panic room door. They were cleaning crime scenes, making murders disappear. Celine's phone was still in the guest bedroom where she'd thrown it earlier. No way to call for help. No way to contact anyone. Not that she knew who to call. Her parents? They'd proven they wouldn't protect her. The police? And tell them what? That she was trapped in a panic room while a criminal erased evidence of justified self-defense? Adrian had brought guns into Kael's home, had tried to kill them both. Kael had defended himself. That was legal, clear-cut. So why hide it? Unless there were other reasons Kael couldn't afford police scrutiny. Unless his entire operation depended on staying invisible to law enforcement. Unless Celine had just become a witness to something that could destroy him. The chemical smell grew stronger. Celine's training from 3 years with Adrian kicked in. She started cataloging exits, resources, options. The panic room had emergency supplies, water, protein bars, first aid kit, but no weapons, no tools. No way to defend herself if the door opened and Kael decided she knew too much. She was thinking like this because Adrian had taught her to. Always assume the worst. Always plan for betrayal. Always know where the exits are. She hated that his paranoia had infected her so deeply that she couldn't even accept rescue without suspecting ulterior motives. But survival meant trusting instincts, and her instincts were screaming. More time passed. The sounds of cleaning gradually faded. Then footsteps approached the panic room again. Celine, Kael's voice. Calm, patient. I know you're scared. I know what you heard, but I need you to listen very carefully. She pressed her ear against the door. The men who came here tonight were professionals, Kael continued. Hired killers. Adrian paid them to murder you. Not kidnap, not threaten. Murder. I found the contract on one of their phones. Celine's breath caught. I'm not the monster in this story, Kael said. I'm the man who stopped you from dying. But I understand if you don't believe that right now. I understand if you think I'm manipulating you. Silence. So here's what's going to happen, Kael continued. I'm going to leave a phone outside this door. It's clean, untraceable, fully charged. You can call anyone you want. Your parents, a lawyer, the police, anyone. And I'll accept whatever you decide. Celine heard something being said on the floor. But before you make that call, Kael said, I need you to understand what Adrian is. Not what he pretended to be, what he actually is. More footsteps, someone else approaching. Show her, Kael said. A tablet slid under the panic room door, thin enough to fit through the gap. Celine picked it up with shaking hands. The screen showed financial records, bank statements, wire transfers, Adrian's accounts. But the numbers didn't make sense. Millions of dollars moving in and out. Transactions to offshore accounts in the Caymans. Transfers to shell companies she didn't recognize. Then she saw the memo lines. Payment for services rendered. Contract fulfillment. Target elimination. Her stomach dropped. She scrolled through more records. Found communications. Encrypted messages that had been decrypted. Adrian's messages. To a man named Victor. Negotiating prices. Discussing targets, confirming kills. Adrian wasn't just a financial criminal. He was paying for murders. Celine kept scrolling, her hands shaking harder with each new page. Found a message dated 3 weeks ago. Adrian to Victor. Need a problem solved. Permanently. Target, wife. Make it look like an accident. Name your price. Victor's response. 50,000. Half up front. Clean job, no blowback. Adrian. Done. Her name is Celine Cross. I'll send details. The tablet slipped from Celine's hands and clattered on the steel floor. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Adrian had tried to have her killed 3 weeks ago, before the restaurant dinner, before Kyle intervened, before any of this started. Adrian had already decided she needed to die. Now you understand, Kyle's voice came through the door. This wasn't about you leaving him. This was about him erasing you before you became a problem. The abuse was just the warm-up. He was always going to kill you eventually. Celine's vision tunneled. I didn't save you from a bad marriage, Kyle continued. I saved you from a murder disguised as one. She couldn't process it. 3 years of believing Adrian loved her in his own broken way. 3 years of thinking if she just tried harder, spoke softer, disappeared more completely, maybe the violence would stop. 3 years of hoping, and the entire time he'd been planning to kill her. The phone's outside when you're ready, Kyle said. Call whoever you need to call. I'll respect whatever decision you make. His footsteps retreated. Celine sat in the darkness, staring at the tablet, reading Adrian's messages over and over. Make it look like an accident. Her name is Celine Cross. I'll send details. She'd been living in a house with a man who was actively planning her murder, sleeping beside him, cooking for him, apologizing to him. The whole time she was already dead in his mind, just waiting for the execution date. Something cracked open inside her chest. Not grief, not fear. Something colder and harder and infinitely more dangerous. Rage, pure, absolute, clarifying rage. Adrian had stolen 3 years of her life, had beaten her, terrorized her, isolated her, and when that wasn't enough, he'd tried to erase her completely, and she'd almost let him, almost stayed quiet, almost kept his secrets, almost died without anyone knowing the truth. Celine picked up the tablet and scrolled through more records, found evidence of other crimes. Money laundering, securities fraud, bribes to federal officials, blackmail schemes. Adrian Cross wasn't just an abuser. He was a criminal empire hiding behind charm and expensive suits. And Kyle had all the evidence. Celine stood up slowly, her legs shaking but her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. She unlocked the panic room door. The penthouse beyond was spotless. No blood, no bodies. No evidence that violence had ever touched these polished floors. Just Kyle standing by the windows, looking out at the city, a phone sitting on the kitchen counter, exactly where he'd promised. He turned when he heard the door open. You read it, he said. Not a question. All of it, Celine replied. They stared at each other across the empty space. What do you want from me? Celine asked. Nothing, Kyle said. Everyone wants something. I want Adrian Cross to face consequences for what he's done, Kyle said. To you, to his investors, to everyone he's hurt. That's all. Why? Because the world lets men like him get away with everything as long as they smile nicely, Kyle said. And I'm tired of watching it happen. Celine walked toward him slowly, still carrying the tablet. The police can't know about this, she said. No, Kyle agreed. Because you can't afford the scrutiny. Correct. So we're both trapped, Celine said. You need Adrian gone. I need justice, but neither of us can go through legal channels. Kyle's expression shifted slightly. What are you suggesting? Celine looked down at the tablet, at the evidence of Adrian's crimes, at the paper trail that proved he was a monster. You said you could make people disappear, she said quietly. I did. Can you make Adrian disappear? Kyle was very still. Yes. Permanently? If that's what you want? Celine met his eyes. It's what I want. They stood in the darkness of Kyle's penthouse, two people who'd both learned that sometimes justice only comes when you stop asking permission and start taking action. This changes you, Kyle warned. Once you cross this line, you can't go back to who you were before. Good, Celine said, because who I was before almost got me killed. Kyle pulled out his phone, made a call. Find Adrian Cross, he said into the receiver. Alive. I don't care how. I don't care what it costs. Bring him to the warehouse by sunrise. He hung up, looked at Celine. Last chance to change your mind, he said. Celine thought about 3 years of Bruises, 3 weeks of Adrian planning her murder, 3 hours of hiding in a panic room while men with guns hunted her. I'm not changing my mind, she said. Then we move tonight, Kyle said, before Adrian runs too far, before he finds new allies, before he has time to regroup. What do you need from me? Nothing yet, Kyle said, but eventually, I need you to be okay with what we're about to do, because once it's done, there's no pretending it didn't happen. Celine looked at the tablet one more time, at the message that confirmed Adrian had wanted her dead. I'm already okay with it, she said. Cale's phone buzzed. He checked it. His expression went cold. What? Celine asked. Adrian just posted on social media, Kyle said, showing her the screen. Adrian's smiling face filled the frame. A video, posted 10 minutes ago. Hi everyone, Adrian's voice came through cheerful and smooth. I know there have been some wild rumors circulating today. I want to address them directly. My wife Celine is currently being held against her will by a known criminal named Kyle Virelli. She's in danger. If anyone has information about her whereabouts, please contact the police immediately. Celine, if you're watching this, I love you. I'm coming for you. Stay strong. The video ended. Celine stared at the screen, rage and disbelief warring in her chest. He's playing the victim, she said. He's playing the public, Kyle corrected, making himself sympathetic, making me the villain, making it look like you're kidnapped instead of escaping. Will it work? With some people, Kyle said. Adrian still has friends, allies, people who believe his performance. His phone started ringing. He checked the screen and silenced it. That's the third reporter in 5 minutes, he said. Adrian's narrative is spreading fast. Celine's hands clenched into fists. So what do we do? We respond, Kale said, with truth. He handed her his phone. Record a video. Tell your story. Show the bruises. Share the evidence. Let the world see what Adrian really is. Celine's throat went tight. I can't. You can. I'm not ready. You'll never be ready, Kyle interrupted. But Adrian just declared war in public. If you don't respond, his narrative wins. Everyone will believe you're kidnapped, that I'm the monster, that he's the heartbroken husband. He is a heartbroken husband, Celine said bitterly. Heartbroken that his plan to murder me failed. Then tell them that, Kyle said. Record it, post it, make them see the truth. Celine took the phone with shaking hands, looked at her reflection in the black screen, saw bruises still fading on her neck, saw exhaustion carved into her face, saw 3 years of survival staring back. She hit record. My name is Celine Vale, she said, her voice steady despite the shaking in her hands. And I'm not kidnapped. I'm escaping. From a man who spent 3 years beating me, terrorizing me, and finally paying someone to kill me. She turned the camera to show her neck, the fingerprint bruises, the marks Adrian's ring had left. These are from my husband, she continued, Adrian Cross. Investment executive, charming, successful, perfect on the outside, and a monster behind closed doors. She uploaded the financial records to the video, the messages between Adrian and Victor. This is proof that he tried to have me murdered 3 weeks ago, she said. Make it look like an accident, he wrote. Her name is Celine Cross. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. I'm not asking for sympathy, she said. I'm telling you the truth. Adrian Cross is not a heartbroken husband. He's a criminal who's terrified his victim finally escaped. She ended the recording, uploaded it to every social media platform she could access, posted it with a single caption, The Truth About Adrian Cross. Then she handed the phone back to Kyle and collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking. It's done, she whispered. Kale checked his phone as notification after notification started flooding in. It's going viral, he said. Within minutes, Celine's video had 10,000 views. Within an hour, 100,000. By midnight, every major news outlet was covering it. The comments poured in, some supportive, some skeptical, some accusing her of lying for attention. But the evidence was there. The bruises were visible, and Adrian's careful reputation began crumbling in real time. Kale's phone rang again. This time he answered. Talk to me, he said. A pause as he listened. Then his expression went dangerous. When? He asked. Another pause. Understood. Keep the perimeter secure. No one in or out. He hung up and looked at Celine. They found Adrian, he said. Where? Your parents' house, Kyle said. He went there looking for sympathy, looking for allies. Your mother let him in. Celine felt something shatter inside her chest. Of course she did, she said bitterly. My team has the house surrounded, Kyle continued. But there's a problem. What problem? Your parents are inside with him, Kyle said, and Adrian has a gun. The world tilted sideways. Celine couldn't breathe, couldn't process, couldn't... He's using them as leverage, Kyle said. Either you turn yourself over to him, or he kills them. Celine stared at Kyle, her mind spinning through impossible options. Her parents who'd ignored her suffering for 3 years. Her parents who'd chosen comfort over truth. Her parents who'd just let her abuse her into their home, despite everything. He's bluffing, Celine said. He won't actually... Kyle's phone buzzed with a new message. He showed her the screen. A photo. Margaret and Richard zip-tied to kitchen chairs. Adrian standing behind them with a gun pressed to Margaret's head. The message below. 1 hour. You come alone, or they die. Your choice, baby. Celine's vision went white at the edges. This is my fault, she whispered. I should have warned them. Should have... You couldn't have known, Kyle said. Yes, I could, Celine said. I knew Adrian wouldn't stop. I knew he'd escalate. I knew... Stop, Kyle interrupted. Adrian made this choice, not you. They're my parents. They're adults who made their own choices too, Kyle said. Choices that put them in danger. I can't let them die because of me. You can't save them by dying either, Kyle said. They stared at each other. What do I do? Celine whispered. Kyle's expression went flat and cold. You let me handle it, he said. How? The way I handle everything, Kyle replied. Quickly, quietly, permanently. He was already making calls, organizing teams, planning an extraction that would end with Adrian dead and her parents safe. Celine should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt something darker. The understanding that her life would forever be divided into before and after this moment. Before, when she believed in legal systems and justice and doing things the right way. After, when she understood that sometimes survival required crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. I want to be there, she said. Kyle looked up from his phone. No. He's using my parents as bait because of me, Celine said. You should stay here where it's safe, Kyle interrupted. I'm done being safe, Celine said. I'm done hiding while other people fight my battles. This isn't a battle, Kyle said. This is an execution, and you don't need that on your conscience. Maybe I do, Celine said. Maybe I need to see him face consequences. Maybe I need to know he can't hurt anyone ever again. Kyle studied her for a long moment. This changes you, he said again, permanently. I know. You can't unsee what you're about to see. I know. And you still want to go? Celine thought about 3 years of bruises. About Adrian's hand crushing her thigh under the dinner table. About his wedding ring tearing her dress. About the message to Victor. Make it look like an accident. Her name is Celine Cross. Yes, she said. I want to go. Kyle nodded once. Then we leave in 10 minutes, he said. And whatever happens next, you remember this was your choice. Celine understood what he was really saying. She was choosing to become someone new, someone harder, someone who didn't flinch from necessary violence, someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to survive monsters was to become something worse. She was choosing to cross a line that would separate her forever from the woman who'd walked into that restaurant dinner believing in second chances and redemption. I understand, she said. Kale pulled a gun from his safe and checked it with practiced efficiency. Then he held it out to Celine. You sure about this? He asked one final time. Celine took the gun, felt its weight, felt the cold metal against her palm, felt the absolute certainty that when this night ended, either Adrian would be dead or she would. I'm sure, she said. And somewhere across the city, in a kitchen where her parents sat zip-tied to chairs while a madman held them hostage, Adrian Cross waited for his wife to walk into his trap. Not knowing she was walking in with a gun and 3 years of accumulated rage and absolutely nothing left to lose. Not knowing that the woman he'd spent 3 years breaking had finally figured out how. The gun felt heavier in Celine's hand with every passing second. She sat in the back of Kael's car as it cut through late-night traffic, the weight of cold metal pressing against her palm like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Outside, the city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. Inside, silence stretched between her and Kael like a chasm neither of them wanted to cross. "You don't have to do this," Kael said finally, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You already said that. I'm saying it again." Celine checked the gun's magazine the way Kael had shown her. Loaded. Safety on. 15 rounds that could end 15 lives if her hand stayed steady enough. "He has my parents," she said. "I can get them out," Kael replied. "That's what I do." "And then what?" Celine asked. Adrian runs, hides, waits, plans, eventually comes back, tries again. We live the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. "Better than living with blood on your hands." Celine looked at him fully. "You have blood on your hands. You're still functioning." "Barely," Kael said quietly. The car turned onto a residential street lined with oak trees and houses that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Celine's parents lived 3 blocks from where she'd grown up, in a colonial with white pillars and a manicured lawn that screamed respectability. The same house where they'd hosted Adrian for Sunday dinners, where they'd celebrated her wedding, where they'd asked her repeatedly if she was happy and accepted every lie she fed them. Kael's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his jaw tightened. "What?" Celine asked. "My team's in position, 4 men covering exits, snipers on the neighbor's roof. Thermal imaging shows 3 people in the kitchen, 2 seated, 1 standing." "Can your snipers take him?" "Not without risking your parents," Kael said. Adrian's positioned himself so any shot would potentially hit them too. "Smart. Desperate," Kael corrected. "Smart would have been leaving the country 3 hours ago." The car slowed to a stop 2 houses down from her parents' place. Every light in the colonial was on, turning the windows into gold rectangles that looked warm and safe from the outside. Lies, Celine thought. Everything about this house was a lie. Kael turned to face her. "Last chance. I go in alone. You stay in the car. My team extracts your parents while I handle Adrian. Clean, professional, over in 3 minutes." "And Adrian?" "Won't walk out," Kael said flatly. Celine should have felt relief. Instead, she felt rage at being sidelined, at being protected, at being treated like she was too fragile to face the man who'd spent 3 years destroying her. "No," she said. "Celine." "No," she repeated. "I'm going in. He asks for me. He gets me." "That's what he wants." "I know." "So you're giving it to him?" "Yes," Celine said. "Because the only way this ends is if I look him in the eye and show him I'm not afraid anymore." Kael studied her face like he was searching for cracks in her resolve. "You're shaking," he observed. Celine looked down at her hands. They were trembling so hard the gun rattled slightly. "Doesn't mean I'm backing down," she said. Kael reached over and steadied her hands with his own. His grip was warm and solid and absolutely certain. "The shaking stops the second you commit," he said. "Fear is indecision. Once you decide, your body follows." "How do I decide?" "You already did," Kael said. "When you picked up that gun, when you got in this car, when you chose survival over safety." He released her hands. "Now you just have to follow through." Celine took 3 deep breaths, felt her heartbeat slow from panicked to purposeful, felt the trembling in her hands gradually settle into something steadier. Kael was right. She'd already decided. Everything after this was just execution. They exited the car simultaneously. The night air was cold enough to bite. Celine's breath came out in visible puffs as they approached the house. Kael moved like a shadow, efficient and lethal. He spoke into a small radio clipped to his collar. "All teams hold position. Target is entering with me. No one moves unless I give the signal." Static crackled back. "Copy?" They reached the front door. It was unlocked. Of course it was. Adrian wanted her to walk in. Kael pushed it open slowly. The hallway beyond was exactly as Celine remembered from 1,000 Sunday dinners. Family photos on the walls, Persian runner on hardwood floors, the smell of her mother's preferred candles mixing with something sharper. Fear, sweat, violence waiting to happen. "Celine?" Adrian's voice drifted from the kitchen. Is that you, baby? She didn't answer. Kael moved forward first, gun raised, checking corners with professional precision. Celine followed, her own weapon held in both hands the way he'd taught her. They reached the kitchen doorway. The scene inside looked like a photograph of suburban normalcy twisted into nightmare. Margaret and Richard sat zip-tied to kitchen chairs, positioned in the center of the room. Margaret's makeup was streaked with tears. Richard's face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. Adrian stood behind them, gun pressed to the base of Margaret's skull. He looked like he'd been through hell. His expensive suit was torn and filthy. His face was cut and bruised from last night's beating. His eyes were wild and red-rimmed and absolutely unhinged. When he saw Celine, his expression transformed into something worse than anger. Possession. There she is, he said softly. My beautiful wife. I'm not your wife, Celine replied, voice steady despite her hammering heart. Legally you are, Adrian said, until a judge says otherwise. The papers are signed. Under duress, Adrian countered. Any lawyer could get that overturned. He pressed the gun harder against Margaret's head. She whimpered. Put down your weapons, Adrian said. Both of you. Or Margaret's brain decorates this nice white kitchen. Kael didn't move. That would be stupid. Why? Because the second you pull that trigger, my team comes through every entrance simultaneously, Kael said. You don't get a second shot. You don't get to run. You just die badly. Maybe, Adrian said. But so does Margaret. Are you willing to make that trade? Kael's expression didn't change. Yes. Margaret made a sound like a wounded animal. You're bluffing, Adrian said. I'm not, Kael replied. Celine's mother made her choice when she let you into this house despite knowing what you are. That choice has consequences. Adrian's face went red. You can't just... I can, Kael interrupted. Because unlike you, I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I'm exactly what you think I am. And if you hurt anyone in this room, I will end you so completely your name becomes a cautionary tale. The gun in Adrian's hand shook. Celine saw it, saw him losing control, saw desperation overriding whatever plan he'd thought he had. Adrian? She said quietly. His eyes snapped to her. Look at me, she continued. Just me. Forget Kael. Forget my parents. Look at me. Adrian's focus narrowed. Okay. What did you think would happen tonight? Celine asked. You'd come home, Adrian said. We'd work this out, like we always do. We never worked anything out, Celine said. You hurt me and I learned to hide it better. That's not working things out. That's survival. I love you. You tried to have me killed, Celine interrupted. Adrian's face went blank. What? The messages to Victor, Celine said. $50,000 to make it look like an accident. I saw everything. That's not... I didn't... Adrian stammered. You did, Celine said. 3 weeks ago. You decided I needed to die. Probably because I was starting to push back. Starting to remember I used to be a person instead of your punching bag. Celine, listen. No, she cut him off. You listen. For 3 years I listened to your lies. Your excuses. Your promises that you'd change. I'm done listening. Now you get to hear truth for once. She took a step forward. Kael shifted slightly but didn't stop her. You're a coward, Celine continued. You beat women because men intimidate you. You steal money because you're too incompetent to earn it honestly. You lie constantly because the truth is you're nothing special, just another small man trying to feel big by destroying someone smaller. Adrian's face was cycling through expressions too fast to track. Rage, denial, panic, shame. That's not true, he whispered. It is, Celine said, and everyone knows now. I posted everything. The bruises, the financial crimes, the messages to Victor. Your whole performance is over. You ruined me, Adrian said, voice breaking. No, Celine replied. I survived you. There's a difference. Adrian's gun hand was shaking violently now. His finger was on the trigger. One wrong move and Margaret died. Put the gun down, Celine said. Let my parents go. Face what you've done like an adult instead of a child throwing a tantrum. I can't, Adrian said. Why not? Because without you, I have nothing, Adrian said. No wife, no business, no reputation. You were supposed to make me look good, make me look stable, make me look like I had it all together. I was supposed to be a person, Celine said, not your prop. Same thing, Adrian muttered. The mask had fully slipped now. Whatever charm he'd weaponized for years was gone. What remained was just a broken man who'd built his entire identity on controlling someone weaker. So what now? Celine asked. You kill my mother, and then what? My father, me, Kyle. Where does it end? I don't know, Adrian admitted. Yes, you do, Celine said. It ends with you in prison or dead. Those are your only options. The question is how many people you take with you. She took another step forward. Cale moved to stop her, but she waved him off. Adrian, she said softly, look at me. He did. Their eyes met across the kitchen. For just a second, Celine saw the man she'd married, the one who'd been charming and attentive during their courtship, the one who'd promised to love her forever. Then she saw what he'd always been underneath, a predator who'd learned to smile. I'm not afraid of you anymore, she said. You should be, Adrian replied. Maybe, Celine said, but I'm not. You've already done your worst. You've beaten me, terrorized me, tried to have me murdered. What else is left? Adrian's mouth opened and closed. Nothing, Celine answered her own question. You have nothing left. No power, no control, no leverage. Just a gun and desperation. She raised her own weapon slowly, pointed it directly at Adrian's chest. So here's what happens next, she said. You put down your gun. You let my parents go. You surrender to Kyle's people. And maybe you survive the night. And if I don't? Adrian asked. Then I shoot you, Celine said simply. The kitchen went silent. Margaret was crying quietly. Richard had his eyes closed like he was praying despite everything. Kyle stood perfectly still, calculating angles and trajectories. And Celine held her gun steady, finger resting on the trigger, 3 years of accumulated rage compressed into this single moment. You won't do it, Adrian said finally. Why not? Because you're not a killer, Adrian said. You're soft, weak. That's why you stayed for 3 years. That's why you let me hurt you. Because deep down, you don't have what it takes to actually fight back. Celine felt something shift inside her chest. The last piece of the old Celine, the one who'd believed in redemption and second chances, finally died. What replaced it was harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous. You're right, she said. I'm not a killer. Adrian's face flooded with relief. But I'm not weak either, Celine continued, and you've mistaken survival for surrender. She adjusted her aim. Not at Adrian's chest anymore, at his gun hand. Last chance, she said. Put it down. No, Adrian said. Okay, Celine replied, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot exploded through the kitchen like a thunderclap. Adrian screamed as the bullet tore through his hand, sending his gun clattering across the tile floor. Blood sprayed across Margaret's yellow wallpaper in an arc of crimson. He collapsed backward, clutching his destroyed hand, howling in pain and disbelief. Cale moved instantly, crossing the kitchen in 3 strides and securing Adrian's dropped weapon. Celine stood frozen, gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel, her ears ringing from the blast. She'd done it. She'd actually pulled the trigger. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Cale cut through her parents' zip ties with a knife from his belt. They collapsed forward, gasping and sobbing. Margaret looked at Celine with an expression somewhere between horror and awe. You shot him, she whispered. Yes, Celine said. You could have killed him. But I didn't, Celine interrupted, because unlike him, I have control. Adrian was writhing on the kitchen floor, blood pooling beneath his ruined hand, his screams gradually dying into whimpers. Cale spoke into his radio. Clean team, kitchen entrance, medical kit. Target is secured. Within seconds, 3 men in black tactical gear entered through the back door. They hauled Adrian upright and zip-tied his wrists, carefully avoiding his destroyed hand. Adrian stared at Celine like he'd never seen her before. You shot me, he said, voice hoarse with shock. Yes. You actually shot me. Yes. I can't believe it. Celine said. This is what you created. You spent 3 years teaching me that mercy is weakness, that violence is power, that survival requires becoming something harder than what hurt you. She lowered the gun finally. Congratulations, she said. Your lessons stuck. Kael's team dragged Adrian toward the door. He struggled weakly, blood dripping from his hand onto the tile. This isn't over, Adrian spat. I'll sue you. I'll press charges. You'll disappear, Kael interrupted. Tonight. Completely. And if you're very lucky, you'll disappear into federal prison instead of something worse. Adrian's face went pale. You can't. I can, Kael said. I have enough evidence to put you away for 20 years. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. Take your pick. I want a lawyer. You'll get one, Kael said, after you've had time to think about your choices in a very uncomfortable warehouse. They dragged Adrian out the back door. His protests faded into the night. The kitchen fell silent except for Margaret's quiet sobbing and Richard's labored breathing. Celine stood in the center of the room, gun still in her hand, surrounded by blood spatter and broken chairs and the ruins of her old life. Kael approached slowly, hand extended. Give me the weapon, he said gently. Celine handed it over. The second it left her grip, her legs gave out. Kael caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her into one of the kitchen chairs. Breathe, he said. Celine tried. Couldn't. Her lungs felt compressed, her vision tunneling. You're having a panic attack, Kael said. It's normal. Just breathe. I shot him, Celine gasped. Yes. I actually pulled the trigger. Yes. I could have killed him. But you didn't, Kael said. You disabled the threat. That's control. That's strength. Celine looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking anymore, just covered in gunpowder residue. Across the kitchen, Margaret finally found her voice. What have you done? She whispered. Celine looked at her mother. I survived. By shooting your husband? By stopping my abuser, Celine corrected. From using you as leverage, from hurting anyone else, from getting away with 3 years of violence. But the police won't be involved, Kael said. This was self-defense. Multiple witnesses, video evidence. But it's cleaner if it stays private. Cleaner, Margaret repeated numbly. For everyone, Kael said. Adrian faces federal charges. You both stay out of the media. Celine doesn't have to testify publicly about 3 years of abuse. Everyone wins except Adrian. Richard finally spoke, his voice rough and broken. I'm sorry. Celine looked at her father. For what? Everything, Richard said. For not seeing it, for not asking harder questions, for choosing comfort over truth, for failing you as a father. Okay, Celine said. Just okay? I don't have the energy for more right now, Celine said. You failed me. Mom failed me. You both know it. We can deal with that later. Right now I need to not be in this house. She stood up slowly, testing her legs. Kael steadied her with a hand on her elbow. You good? No, Celine said. But I will be. She walked toward the kitchen door, stepping carefully around the blood. Margaret called after her. Where are you going? Away, Celine said without turning around. When will we see you again? I don't know, Celine said. Maybe never. Maybe next week. I'll let you know when I figure it out. She left through the front door, Kael close behind her. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and clean and free from the smell of blood and fear. Kael's car was still parked 2 houses down. They walked toward it in silence. Halfway there, Celine stopped. I need a minute, she said. Kael nodded and leaned against a tree, giving her space. Celine stood in the middle of the suburban street, surrounded by neat lawns and sleeping houses and families who had no idea what had just happened 3 doors down. Her hand still tingled where the gun had recoiled. Her ears still rang from the shot. Her mind kept replaying the moment she'd pulled the trigger. The decision, the action, the consequence. She'd crossed a line tonight, shot someone, chosen violence over helplessness, become something her old self wouldn't recognize. And she didn't regret it, not even a little. That should have scared her. Instead, it felt like freedom. Kael approached slowly. You okay? I shot him, Celine said. I know. I didn't hesitate. I know. Doesn't that make me like him? Celine asked. Violent? Dangerous? Willing to hurt people? No, Cale said. It makes you a survivor who stopped letting fear make decisions. How is that different? Intent, Cale said. He hurt you to feel powerful. You hurt him to stop him from hurting others. Motivation matters. Celine looked at him fully. Do you believe that? Most days, Kyle said. And the other days? I tell myself it's true until I believe it again. They stood in silence. Then Celine said, What happens now? Now Adrian goes to federal prison, Kyle said. His assets get seized. His victims get restitution. And you get to figure out who you are without him. And us? What about us? Is this where you tell me I'm on my own? Celine asked. That you've done your part and I need to figure out the rest myself? Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Is that what you want? No, Celine admitted. I don't know how to do this alone. Then you don't have to, Cale said simply. Why would you stay? Because I started this, Kyle said, when I punched Adrian in that restaurant, when I brought you to my penthouse, when I showed you that fighting back was possible. I don't abandon projects halfway through. I'm a project? You're a person who deserves better than what she got, Kyle corrected. And until you believe that yourself, someone needs to remind you. Celine felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, opening. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Kyle said. Healing is harder than surviving. You'll hate me some days for forcing you through it. Maybe, Celine said, but at least I'll be alive to hate you. They walked back to the car together. Cale opened the door for her. She slid into the passenger seat. As they pulled away from her parents' house, Celine looked back one final time. The Colonial still glowed with warm light, still looked safe and respectable from the outside. But she knew better now. Knew that safety was a performance, that respectability was a mask, that the most dangerous violence happened behind closed doors in houses that looked perfect. She turned forward and didn't look back again. The city spread before them, infinite with possibility and danger and the hard work of becoming someone new. Somewhere in a warehouse across town, Adrian Cross was learning that money and charm couldn't save him from consequences anymore. Somewhere in a kitchen 3 blocks away, Margaret and Richard Vale were confronting 3 years of willful blindness. And somewhere in the passenger seat of Kyle Varelli's car, Celine Vale was discovering that she was capable of violence and survival and choosing herself even when it hurt. The gun residue was still on her hands. The sound of the gunshot still echoed in her ears. And she wasn't sorry. Not even a little. That realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing she'd done in 3 years. Kyle glanced at her. You good? Ask me tomorrow, Celine said. Fair enough. They drove through the city in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd both learned that sometimes justice required crossing lines the law wouldn't. And when they finally reached Kyle's building, when they rode the elevator up to the penthouse where this had all started, Celine realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Adrian, not of consequences, not of becoming someone her old self wouldn't recognize, because that old self had almost gotten her killed. This version knew how to pull the trigger, and that made all the difference. 3 days passed before Celine could sleep without hearing the gunshot. She'd returned to Kyle's penthouse that first night covered in gunpowder residue, and her mother's tears, walked directly to the guest suite and locked the door. Kyle hadn't tried to stop her, hadn't offered comfort or conversation or anything except silence and space. He understood that some things needed to be processed alone. Celine spent those first 72 hours cycling through every emotion humans had invented names for, and several they hadn't. Rage at Adrian for forcing her hand, guilt for shooting him despite knowing he deserved worse, relief that it was finally over, terror that it wasn't. Mostly she felt numb, like someone had reached inside her chest and disconnected all the wires that made feelings happen automatically. On the 4th morning, she emerged from the guest suite to find Kyle sitting at the kitchen island with coffee and a newspaper that somehow still existed in physical form. He looked up when she entered, but didn't smile or stand or make any sudden movements that might spook her back into hiding. Coffee's fresh, he said, same words as the first morning. Safe. Predictable. Celine poured herself a cup and stood across from him, the kitchen island creating necessary distance. What happened to Adrian? She asked. Cale folded the newspaper carefully. He's in federal custody. Arraignment happened yesterday. Judge denied bail. Too much flight risk. The shooting? Self-defense, Cale said. Multiple witnesses, video evidence. The DA isn't pursuing charges. And the attempted murder contract? Victor was arrested 2 days ago in Miami, Cale said. He's cooperating. Gave investigators everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. Adrian's looking at 25 years minimum. Celine absorbed this information like she was hearing about a stranger. So it's over. The legal part is, Cale said. The rest takes longer. How much longer? Depends on you. Celine took a long drink of coffee. It was too hot and burned her throat, but the pain felt clarifying. Real. Evidence she was still capable of feeling something. My parents have been calling, she said. I know. I've been declining them. Thank you. You'll have to talk to them eventually, Cale said. I know, Celine replied. Just not yet. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city was waking up. Traffic building. People flooding into their daily routines. The world continuing like nothing had changed, even though everything had. I need to do something, Celine said finally. Like what? I don't know, she admitted, but I can't just sit in that guest room forever processing trauma. I need purpose, structure, something that proves I'm still alive. Cale considered this. What did you do before Adrian? I was studying literature at Columbia, Celine said. I wanted to be a professor, teach, write, something that mattered. And Adrian made you quit. Adrian suggested I focus on supporting his career instead, Celine corrected. I went along with it because disagreeing meant consequences. You could go back, Cale said. Finish your degree. Celine shook her head. That version of me is gone. I can't just pick up where I left off like the last 3 years didn't happen. Then do something new. Like what? Cale pulled out his phone and showed her a website. I fund a women's shelter, has been running for 5 years, provides housing, legal aid, therapy, job training for domestic violence survivors. They're always looking for people who understand what it's like. Celine scrolled through the site. Photos of women at different stages of healing, testimonials, resources. Hope wrapped in practical action. You run this? She asked. I fund it, Cale corrected. Other people run it. I just make sure they have resources. Why? Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Because my mother spent 15 years with a man who beat her, and no one helped. No one even asked if she was okay. She died when I was 17, stroke. But really it was 15 years of accumulated stress and terror and a body that finally gave up. Celine looked at him fully, saw the scars she'd noticed before in a new context, saw the careful distance he maintained from everyone, saw the controlled violence that came from learning early that the world was dangerous and help wasn't coming. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be, Cale replied. Be useful instead. That shelter needs people who've survived, people who can look new arrivals in the eye and say, I know what you're going through, and mean it. I don't know if I'm ready. Whoa. You shot your abuser to protect your parents, Cale interrupted. You posted evidence of his crimes publicly. You're sitting here drinking coffee instead of hiding in a panic room. You're ready. Celine wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways she was still broken and fragile and barely holding herself together. But maybe that was the point. Maybe being ready didn't mean being healed. Maybe it just meant being willing to try. Okay, she said. Okay? Yeah. I'll visit the shelter, Celine said. See if I can help. Cale nodded once. I'll set it up. He made a call. Spoke briefly to someone named Diana. Hung up and looked at Celine. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Diana runs the place. She's expecting you. What do I say? The truth, Cale said. Everything else follows from that. The next morning, Celine took a car to an address in Brooklyn that turned out to be a converted brownstone with bars on the windows and a reinforced door. Security measures disguised as architecture. A woman in her 50s answered the buzzer. Diana. Gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. eyes that had seen everything and still chose kindness. "You must be Celine," she said. "Come in." The interior was nothing like Celine expected. Warm colors, comfortable furniture, children's drawings on the refrigerator. It looked like a home instead of an institution. "We have 12 women here right now," Diana explained as she led Celine through the space, plus 6 kids. Ages range from 19 to 63. Some stay a few weeks, some stay months. Everyone heals at their own pace. They passed a common room where 3 women sat watching morning television. One of them had a black eye fading to yellow. Another had her arm in a sling. The third looked physically unharmed but had the same hollow-eyed expression Celine remembered from mirrors. "Do they know who I am?" Celine asked quietly. "They know you survived," Diana said. "That's all that matters here." They ended up in Diana's office, a small room with a desk covered in paperwork and photos of women at various stages of recovery. "Kyle told me what you've been through," Diana said, "and what you did 4 nights ago." "I shot someone," Celine said flatly. "You stopped a threat," Diana corrected. "There's a difference." "That's what Kyle said." "Kyle's right," Diana replied. "Most women who come through here never get the chance to fight back, never get justice, never see their abusers face consequences. You did all 3. That makes you rare. Or violent. Or empowered," Diana said. "Depends on how you frame it." Celine looked at the photos on the wall. Women smiling. Women working. Women existing without fear etched into every muscle. "How do they do it?" Celine asked. "Move forward, build new lives, stop being defined by what happened to them." "Slowly," Diana said, "one decision at a time. One day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time." "That's it?" "That's it," Diana confirmed. "There's no magic formula, no switch that flips from broken to healed, just consistent choice to keep breathing, keep trying, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today." "And if it's not, then you try again the next day," Diana said, "until eventually more days are good than bad, until eventually the bad days are survivable instead of destroying." Celine felt something shift in her chest. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the first microscopic movement toward it. "What would I do here?" she asked. "Whatever you're capable of," Diana said. "Some survivors volunteer in the kitchen, some help with childcare, some just sit with new arrivals and listen. You'd figure out what fits. I don't know if I have anything to offer. You survived 3 years of systematic abuse and came out the other side capable of protecting yourself and others," Diana said. "That's more valuable than any credential." A knock on the office door interrupted them. One of the women from the common room stood in the hallway. Early 20s, bruises on her neck, eyes that couldn't quite make contact. "Sorry to interrupt," she said quietly. I wanted to say thank you." Celine blinked. "For what?" "I saw your video," the woman said. "The one you posted about your husband, about the abuse. It's the reason I finally left mine. Seeing someone actually fight back and survive, it made me believe I could too." Celine's throat went tight. "What's your name?" she asked. "Michelle." "How long have you been here?" 3 days, Michelle said. "Longest 3 days of my life, but also the first time I've slept without checking if the bedroom door was locked." Celine understood that completely. "It gets easier," she said, even though she didn't know if that was true yet, even though she was still figuring it out herself. But Michelle needed to hear it, and maybe saying it out loud would make it true eventually. Michelle smiled, small, fragile, real. "Thank you," she said again, then disappeared back down the hallway. Diana watched Celine's face carefully. "Still think you have nothing to offer?" Celine couldn't answer. She left the shelter 2 hours later with Diana's contact information and a promise to return the following week. Not to volunteer yet, just to visit, to see if she could handle being around other women's trauma when she was still processing her own. Kale's car was waiting outside. She slid into the back seat and the driver pulled into traffic without asking where she wanted to go. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Please call me. We need to talk about what happened, about the future, about us." Celine stared at the message for a long time. Then she blocked the number. Maybe someday she'd be ready to have that conversation, to parse through her parents' failures and her own complicated feelings about people who'd loved her but hadn't protected her. But not today. Today she needed to focus on breathing, on continuing to exist, on figuring out who she was when she wasn't busy surviving. The car pulled up to Kyl's building. Celine rode the elevator to the penthouse, found Kyle exactly where she'd left him that morning, working at his laptop like the world's most dangerous accountant. He looked up when she entered. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I don't know yet," Celine said. "Ask me in a week." Fair enough. She poured herself water from the kitchen and stood at the windows overlooking the city. Millions of people down there living their lives, some of them safe, some of them trapped, some of them figuring out how to be the first one after years of being the second. "Can I ask you something?" she said without turning around. "Yes?" "Why me?" Selena asked. "You see violence every day, abuse, injustice. Why did you decide to intervene specifically for me?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I watched you at that dinner table, watched you make yourself invisible, watched you calculate every word and gesture to avoid triggering him. And I saw my mother, exactly as she was before she died. And I thought if I just sat there and did nothing, I'd be exactly like everyone who sat around and watched her suffer." He stood up and moved to stand beside her at the window. "I couldn't save her," he continued, "but I could save you, so I did." Celine looked at him, really looked at him, saw the man who'd built an empire on controlled violence but used it to fund shelters and protect women and dismantle abusers piece by piece. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "A savior," Celine said. "Someone white knight who'd fix everything and expect gratitude in return. And instead, someone who understands that saving people is messier than stories make it seem," Celine said. "That trauma doesn't end when the threat disappears. That surviving is just the first step in a very long process." "Correct," Kyle said. They stood at the window watching the city breathe. Then Celine said, "I need to see him." Kyle didn't ask who. "Why?" "Because I need to know it's real," Celine said. "That he's actually in custody. That he can't hurt me anymore. That I'm not just dreaming this whole thing. Seeing him will be hard." "Everything is hard," Celine replied. "At least this way, I get closure." Kyle considered this, then pulled out his phone. "I can arrange a visit," he said. "But you need to be sure. Once you see him, you can't unsee it." "I'm sure." 2 days later, Celine sat in a federal detention center visiting room, separated from Adrian Cross by reinforced glass and 3 years of accumulated rage. He looked terrible. Orange jumpsuit, bandaged hand, face gaunt and gray, eyes that had lost all their charm and revealed only exhaustion underneath. When he saw her, something flickered across his face. Hope, maybe, or desperation. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass. Celine picked up hers. "You came," Adrian said. "I came." "I knew you would," he continued. "I knew you still cared." "I don't," Celine interrupted. "I came to see you powerless, to confirm you can't hurt me anymore, to say goodbye." Adrian's face crumpled. "Celine, please. I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes. You tried to have me killed," Celine said. "That's not a mistake. That's attempted murder. I was desperate." "You were a coward," Celine corrected, "who built his entire identity on controlling someone weaker. And when that control slipped, you decided elimination was easier than accountability." Adrian's hand pressed against the glass, the bandaged one, the one Celine had shot. "I loved you," he whispered. "No, you didn't," Celine said. "You loved the idea of me, the trophy wife who made you look good, the invisible woman who never challenged you, the victim who stayed silent. You never loved the actual person I am because you never bothered to find out who that was." "That's not fair." "It's completely fair," Celine said. "And you know it. That's why you're sitting in federal detention instead of fighting these charges. Because deep down, you know you deserve this." Adrian's eyes filled with tears. Celine felt nothing watching them fall. "What happens now?" he asked. "You go to prison," Celine said, "for a very long time. I rebuild my life without you. And eventually, you become a cautionary tale I tell other women so they recognize the warning signs earlier than I did." "I could have given you everything. You gave me nothing but pain," Celine interrupted, "and I'm giving it back." She stood up. Adrian lurched forward. Wait, please. Don't leave like this. I don't care what you need, Celine said. I spent 3 years prioritizing your needs over my safety. I'm done. She hung up the phone. Adrian kept talking on his side of the glass, mouth moving desperately, hand pressed against the barrier. Celine turned and walked away, didn't look back, didn't hesitate. Just walked out of the detention center into afternoon sunlight and realized with absolute clarity that she was free. Cale was waiting by the car. You okay? He asked. Yes, Celine said, and meant it. They drove back to the penthouse in silence, comfortable now instead of tense. When they arrived, Celine found an envelope waiting on the kitchen counter, her name written in handwriting she didn't recognize. What's this? She asked. From your father, Kyle said. Delivered this morning. Celine opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, handwritten, several pages. Celine, I know you're not ready to talk to us. I understand why. But your mother and I need you to know some things, even if you're not ready to hear them in person. We failed you. Completely. Unforgivably. We saw the signs and chose comfort over truth. We prioritized our relationship with Adrian over your safety. We convinced ourselves that your marriage was your business, and we shouldn't interfere. Those were all choices. Bad ones. Cowardly ones. We don't expect forgiveness. We don't even deserve the chance to ask for it. But we want you to know that we see our failures now. We understand what our willful blindness cost you. Your mother has started therapy. So have I. We're trying to understand how we became the kind of people who could watch their daughter suffer and do nothing. It's hard work. Painful work. But necessary. We've also started volunteering at a domestic violence awareness organization, teaching other parents how to recognize the signs we ignored, how to ask hard questions instead of accepting easy answers, how to choose their children's safety over their own comfort. It doesn't undo what we failed to do for you. Nothing can, but maybe we can keep other parents from making the same mistakes. You don't owe us anything, not your time, not your forgiveness, not your presence in our lives. We understand if you need to cut us off completely to heal, but if someday you're ready to talk, we'll be here, ready to listen, ready to accept accountability, ready to be the parents we should have been 3 years ago. We love you. We're sorry. And we'll spend the rest of our lives trying to be worthy of a second chance we know we don't deserve. Dad. Celine read the letter 3 times, felt something complicated and painful shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the first microscopic seed of possibility that forgiveness might grow eventually. She folded the letter carefully and set it on the counter. You okay? Kyle asked. I don't know, Celine said. They're trying. That's more than they did before. But trying doesn't erase 3 years of failure. No, Kyle agreed. It doesn't. So what do I do? Whatever you need to do, Kyle said. There's no right answer, just choices that feel more honest than others. Celine looked at the letter again. I'm not ready to see them yet. Okay. But maybe someday. Also okay. Is it normal to feel angry and sad and grateful all at the same time? Yes, Kyle said. That's called being human. Feelings don't come one at a time. They pile up and contradict each other and refuse to make sense. Celine laughed. Actually laughed. First time in weeks. When did you become a therapist? She asked. I'm not, Kyle said. I'm just someone who's been broken enough times to recognize the patterns. Weeks passed, then months. Celine started volunteering at the shelter 3 days a week. Mostly she just listened, sat with new arrivals and let them talk or cry or sit in silence. Sometimes she shared her own story. Sometimes she didn't. She learned that healing wasn't linear. Some days she felt strong and capable and ready to take on the world. Other days she couldn't get out of bed because the weight of everything that had happened felt too heavy to carry. Both were normal. Both were part of the process. She started therapy with a woman named Dr. Chen who specialized in trauma. Spent sessions crying or raging or dissecting the ways abuse had rewired her brain to prioritize survival over everything else. It was hard work, exhausting work, but necessary. She also started writing again. Not academic papers, just stream of consciousness journals that helped her process everything she couldn't say out loud. Some days she wrote about Adrian, about the abuse, about the moment she'd pulled the trigger. Other days she wrote about Kyle, about the strange safety she felt in his presence, about the way he maintained careful distance but never abandoned her. Other days she wrote about herself, about the woman she used to be, and the woman she was becoming, and the confusing space between them where she currently existed. 6 months after the shooting, she finally called her parents. They met for coffee. Neutral territory. A cafe halfway between their house and Kyle's building. Margaret looked older. Richard looked diminished. They both looked genuinely sorry. "Thank you for agreeing to see us," Margaret said quietly. "I'm not agreeing to anything except coffee," Celine replied. "Don't read more into this than it is." "We understand," Richard said. They sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Then Celine said, "I read your letter." "All of it?" Richard asked. "Multiple times." "And?" Margaret's voice was hesitant, fragile. "And I'm not ready to forgive you," Celine said. "But I appreciate that you're trying to do better. That matters." Margaret started crying, quiet tears that she didn't try to hide or apologize for. "We failed you," she said, "every single day for 3 years, and I don't know how to live with that." "You figure it out the same way I'm figuring out how to live with being abused," Celine said. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of not running away from the truth." Richard reached across the table like he might take her hand, then thought better of it and pulled back. "Can we try again?" he asked. "Not to erase what happened, just to build something new." "Maybe," Celine said, "eventually, but I need more time." "We'll wait," Margaret said, "as long as you need." They finished their coffee, exchanged careful hugs, made vague promises about meeting again soon. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning, and sometimes beginnings were enough. 1 year after the restaurant dinner, Celine stood in Kyle's penthouse, looking out at the city that had witnessed her destruction and reconstruction. Adrian was serving his sentence, 27 years. He'd be old when he got out, broken, powerless. The thought gave Celine no pleasure, just quiet satisfaction that he could never hurt anyone again. Her parents were part of her life again, carefully, with boundaries and honesty and acceptance that some damage couldn't be fully repaired. The shelter had become her purpose. She ran support groups now, helped new arrivals navigate legal systems, shared her story when it helped and stayed quiet when it didn't. She'd moved out of Kyle's guest suite 3 months ago, got her own apartment in Brooklyn. Small, but hers. Safe, but independent. She saw Kyle regularly, coffee, dinner, conversations that ranged from shallow to profound depending on the day. Something existed between them that neither of them had named. Not quite friendship, not quite romance, something harder to categorize. Partnership, maybe. Two people who'd both survived different versions of violence and found unexpected companionship in shared understanding. "You ready?" Kyle asked from behind her. Celine turned. He was dressed in a dark suit, ready for the charity gala he'd invited her to attend. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said. "You don't have to go," Kyle reminded her. "If it's too much." "It's not," Celine interrupted. "I want to. I want to prove to myself that I can exist in those spaces without falling apart. And if you do fall apart, then I leave," Celine said, "and try again next time." They took the elevator down to the car, drove through the city toward a ballroom filled with wealthy people pretending to care about causes while really just networking. Celine had attended 100 events like this with Adrian, always as decoration, always invisible except as proof of his stability and success. Tonight she was attending as herself, funded by her own work at the shelter, representing the women she'd helped instead of existing as someone's accessory. It felt revolutionary. The gala was exactly as terrible as she remembered. Champagne and false laughter and conversations about nothing that mattered. But she survived it, made polite conversation, shared her work, watched Kyle navigate the crowd with practiced ease. Halfway through the evening, she stepped outside onto a balcony for air. Kyle joined her a minute later. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," Celine said. "Actually, yes. I'm not pretending. I'm not calculating. I'm just existing in this space without fear. That's progress." Significant progress, Kyle agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. Then Celine said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me," Celine said. "In that restaurant. When everyone else looked away. You saw me. You saw what was happening, and you decided it mattered enough to intervene." "You would have survived without me," Kyle said. "Maybe," Celine replied, "but I wouldn't have survived the same way. You gave me permission to fight back, to believe I was worth protecting, to understand that monsters survive when powerful people stay comfortable." She looked at him fully. "You taught me that I could be powerful too," she said. "Not in his way, not through violence and control, but through refusing to be silent, through choosing myself even when it hurt, through surviving and then using that survival to help others." Kale's expression was unreadable. "You did all that yourself." "You showed me it was possible," Celine said. "That matters." She leaned over and kissed his cheek. Brief, grateful, uncomplicated. When she pulled back, Kyle was almost smiling. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just thinking about how far you've come from the woman sitting at that dinner table a year ago." "Different person entirely," Celine agreed. "Better person?" Celine considered this. "Stronger, more honest, more willing to take up space. Whether that's better depends on who's judging." "And who are you trying to please?" "No one," Celine said. "For the first time in my life, I'm just trying to be myself, whoever that turns out to be." They returned to the gala, stayed another hour, then left together. Kyle's car dropped Celine at her apartment in Brooklyn. "You good from here?" he asked. "Yes." "Call if you need anything." "I will." She exited the car and watched it pull away, then turned and walked into her building, climbed 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door and stepped inside. Her space, her rules, her life. No one to calculate around, no one to apologize to, no one to make herself smaller for, just Celine. Complicated and damaged and healing and alive. She poured herself wine and stood at her window looking out at Brooklyn spreading beneath her in layers of light and shadow. Somewhere across the city, Kyle was returning to his penthouse. Somewhere in federal prison, Adrian was learning what powerlessness felt like. Somewhere in a suburban colonial, her parents were trying to become better people. Somewhere in a shelter, Michelle and a dozen other women were taking their first steps toward freedom. And here, in a small apartment that smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings, Celine Vale was figuring out who she was when she wasn't busy surviving. It was hard work, messy work, work that would probably take the rest of her life. But for the first time in 3 years, she had the rest of her life to give it. The bruises had faded completely now. Just ghosts on skin that remembered trauma but no longer carried visible proof. The fear had dimmed to manageable levels, still there, probably always would be, but no longer consuming every thought and decision. The rage had transformed into purpose, energy redirected toward helping others instead of destroying herself. And Celine had learned the most important lesson survival teaches. That living and merely existing are different things. That she'd spent 3 years existing in the negative space around Adrian's violence, and now she was learning how to actually live. In her own skin, in her own choices, in her own version of strength that didn't require becoming what had hurt her. She raised her wine glass toward the window, toward the city that had witnessed her breaking and reconstruction, toward the future that terrified and excited her in equal measure, toward the woman she was becoming even if she didn't fully understand her yet. "Here's to survival," she whispered to the empty apartment, "and everything that comes after." The city glittered back at her like it was listening, like it approved, like it understood that some stories don't end cleanly with villains punished and victims healed. Some stories end with messy progress and complicated feelings, and the understanding that healing is a direction rather than a destination. Celine finished her wine and went to bed. Tomorrow she'd wake up and do the work again. Continue choosing herself. Continue building a life that belonged to her instead of being shaped around someone else's violence. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But it would be hers. And after 3 years of having nothing that belonged to her, that felt like revolution. The penthouse across town stayed lit long after midnight. Kyle working at his laptop, moving money, protecting assets, maintaining the careful empire he'd built on controlled violence and strategic mercy. He'd saved Celine because he couldn't save his mother, but somewhere along the way she'd saved something in him too, reminded him that power could be used for protection instead of just profit, that some things mattered more than maintaining comfortable distance, that monsters survived when powerful people stayed comfortable. And he was done being comfortable. The shelter he funded would expand next year. More beds, more resources, more women given the chance Celine had claimed. It wasn't redemption, but it was purpose. And sometimes purpose was enough. The city slept around them. Millions of people living millions of stories, some of them triumphant, some of them tragic, most of them somewhere in between. Celine's story wasn't over, neither was Kael's, but this chapter was complete. The monster had been defeated. The victim had become a survivor. The survivor had become an advocate. And somewhere in the messy space between trauma and healing, Celine Vale had discovered something more valuable than justice or revenge or closure. She'd discovered herself. Flawed, complicated, still figuring it out. But hers. Finally, completely, irrevocably hers. And that made all the difference.